Good morning. We will pay attention to the transactions that we have with creditors. Credit purchase transaction is the first transaction that we will have with a creditor. When we buy goods on credit, we will receive an invoice. It is very important to look at the receive word because invoices are also used in sales transactions. So when it's purchases, it's an invoice received. If it is a sales transaction, it is an invoice issued. Entities often buy goods from factories and wholesalers that they will sell in their businesses again, and because they don't have enough money, they can either buy cash or credit. They will quite often buy the goods on credit. They will receive a credit invoice for these credit transactions, and at the end of the month they will send a statement of account to the business so that they know what is the outstanding amount so that they can pay it. The creditor that the business owes the money to is a liability, and when we buy goods, it will increase on the credit side. In the subsidiary journal, you will open a creditor's journal with a document number, and remember now, when we buy goods, we buy from 10 or 15 or 20 different wholesalers and manufacturers. So we can't use the number that's on their invoice because we will never be able to find it again. So we renumber them from number 1, 2, 3, 4 so that it's easy to find after it was filed. So in your creditor's journal, you will always start with number 1, then number 2, 3, 4, and the next month you will carry on with 5, 6, 7. You write down the date, the name of the people that provided you with the goods. In the creditor's control column, you will show the total amount that you owe the creditor. Then you will split this amount into the various sections so that you know to which ledger accounts you must post these entries. So in this case, the inventory was 5,000 and stationery that we purchased was 400. The sundries column section here is very important. If you put an amount in the sundry accounts column, you have to say to which ledger account you will transfer the information. So these two is like a twin. You can't separate them. It doesn't matter in which subsidiary journal you have a sundry column. As soon as you put an amount in the sundry column, you have to indicate to which ledger account it will go. Hatfield Traders, we bought a total of 3,400. So we show the total in the creditor's control because that is the total amount that we owe them. Then we split it and we say we bought inventory for 2,800 and we bought equipment for 600. Again, the figure is there, so they must have the account to which it will be posted. At the end of the month, we will add up the totals in these columns to determine what is our total amount in the creditor's journal at the end of the month. Now, we have two different ledgers that we have to use here. So the general ledger is where we do the double entries. Then we also have a creditor's ledger that we will open for every individual person or business that we deal with. So we will have an account in the creditor's ledger for DE traders. What happened in this entry on the 5th? We bought for 5,400. So I will show I used invoice number 1. It's important to write now down the name of the source document that you know which source document was used, plus the number that you allocated to that source document. Because we buy on credit, it is a liability, so liabilities increase on the credit side and decrease on the debit side. So the 5,400 will be recorded on the credit side. In the creditor's ledger, as soon as you record an entry, you work out immediately what is the balance, so that you can see how much money do you owe the creditor. If we look at Hatfield Traders, the date that this transaction took place was on the 10th. This is now my invoice renumbering, invoice 2. I indicate from which journal did I post it, and the total amount that we owe them is 3,400, and we will show that we owe them 3,400. So the entries that's posted to the subsidiary ledger, creditors ledger or debtors ledger, is done on a daily basis so that you can see immediately how much money is outstanding to this creditor. We also have to post the totals in our creditors journal to the general ledger, and in the general ledger we complete double entries. So first of all, the total amount that we owe the creditors is 8,800. So I will credit the creditors with 8,800 because the liability increases on the credit side and decreases on the debit side. Inventories that we purchased was 7,800. Inventory is an asset. Assets increase on the debit side, decrease on the credit side. We have more assets, so we will debit our inventory account with 7,800. Then we also bought stationery for 400, so I will debit my stationery account with 400, and we bought equipment for 600, so I will debit my equipment account with 600. And if I add up the figures on the debit side, so if I add those three figures, it must equal the amount on the credit side to ensure that we've completed a double entry. What's very important in the general ledger is when we post totals, we will record the entries on the last day of the month. So in the inventory account that's got a total and the creditors control account with a total, we will post at the end of the month. Any amounts that's in the sundry columns will be posted on the day that the transaction took place. So equipment is on the 10th and stationery is on the 5th. What did we learn? When we buy goods on credit, we will receive invoices, and we will use these invoices to record the credit purchases in the creditors journal. The entries in the creditors journal is posted to the individual accounts of your creditors in the creditors ledger on a daily basis so that you can determine exactly how much money is owed. The total of the creditors column in the creditors journal are posted to the creditors control account in the general ledger to complete the double entries. The creditors control account is to use to record the total purchases for the month. So the individual entries will be posted to your other ledger accounts, and the total of your purchases, total of creditors allowances, total payments will be posted to the creditors control account, and therefore the total of all the outstanding amounts, so if you take all your creditors and you add all the outstanding amounts at the end of the month, then that total in the creditors ledger must be equal to the balance in the creditors control account, because the creditors control account is a summary of all the entries that was entered into the creditors ledger. We will record the total of the creditors control column in the cash payments journal, the total of the creditors control column in the creditors journal, in the creditors allowances journal, and in the general journal to our creditors control account. So therefore the creditors control account is a summary of all the entries that was entered in the subsidiary journals. The individual entries in the subsidiary journals will be recorded in the individual accounts of the creditors in the creditors ledger.